Okay, so some decimals keep repeating. Now they can repeat in a few different ways. Either the same number can just keep repeating. Now, if this does happen where the same number keeps repeating, in order to round a decimal like that, all you need to do is rewrite it as follows. So you put a dot over the number that keeps repeating. Okay, so you do this when the number keeps repeating. Okay, so the other type of repeating decimals are when the same two different numbers keeps repeating. So as you can see in this one, we got 39, 39, 39, and 39. So if you have a situation like this, then you can rewrite the decimal as follows. So you put a line over the two numbers that keep repeating. So again, if the same two different numbers keeps repeating, as this one here, then you put a line over those two different numbers that keep repeating. So the other type of repeating decimals are when you have three or more numbers that keep repeating, like the one we have here. So here we got 319, 319, and 319. So if you have a decimal like this, you just write it as follows. So you put a dot over the first number in the pattern, and then you put a dot over the last number in the pattern. Okay, so you do this when you have three or more numbers that keep repeating. Okay, so let's test our knowledge on what we've learnt so far. So let's look at this number here. We have 0.040121212. So we can see that the first three decimals here aren't necessarily a pattern, but there's definitely a pattern occurring over here. Now, the pattern is the same two different numbers that keep repeating. So you can see that we've got two different numbers here that keep repeating. So that's the pattern. So in that case, we can write this as follows. And we can put a line over the repeating pattern. And the reason why we put a line is because it's only the same two different numbers that keep repeating. So that's why we put the line. Okay, so let's now test our knowledge a little bit further. So I want you to look at question 7. This, by the way, is on page 216. So question 7 is saying convert each of the following to a decimal. Continue dividing until a pattern emerges. Then round the answer to the number of decimal places indicated in the brackets. Okay, so I want for us to do question 7H, because I think that one's the most challenging of them. If you're able to do this question, I believe you can do any of these others here. Okay, so we know how to change a fraction to a decimal. We should know how to do that by now. So if you remember, we put the denominator on the outside of the division sign, and we put the numerator on the inside, making sure that we put a decimal after the numerator and then a 0, and then putting a decimal directly above the decimal inside the division sign. So now we want to go ahead and treat this as a normal division application. So we ask the question, how many times does 7 go into 1? It doesn't. We put a 0 there. Now we treat this as the number 10, not 1.0. So how many times does 7 go into the number 10? And we know that 7 only goes in once. Okay? So now the remainder is basically 10 minus 7 is 3. So the remainder is 3, and we put a 0 after the remainder. So now this becomes the number 30. So now we're asking how many times does 7 go into 30, or what's 30 divided by 7? And we know that the number 7 goes into 30. It doesn't go into 30 equally, but before it goes over the number 30, 7 goes into 30 4 times. So there's 4 groups of 7 in the number 30. Now we know that 7 times 4 is 28. Now the remainder therefore is 30 minus 28, and the remainder is 2. Okay, so again we put a 0 next to the remainder. So now this becomes the number 20. So now we're saying what's 20 divided by 7? And we know that 7 goes evenly into 20 only 2 times, because 7 times 2 is 14. So the remainder therefore is 20 minus 14 equals 6. So the remainder is 6. Again, we put a 0 next to the remainder. So now this becomes the number 60. So now we're asking how many groups of 7 go into 60. And we know from our times tables that 7 times 8 is 56. So there's another remainder here. So 60 minus 56 is 4. So the remainder is 4. And we put a 0 next to the remainder. So now this becomes the number 40. So now we want to find out how many groups of 7 go into the number 40. And we know that 7 times 5 is 35. So 7 goes into 40 5 times, and 40 minus 35 is 5. So the remainder is 5. And we put a 0 next to the remainder. So now this becomes the number 50. So now we're asking how many times does 7 go into the number 50? And we know that 7 times 7 is 49. So 7 goes into 50 7 times, and there's a remainder of 1. So we put a 0 next to the 1. So now this becomes the number 10. And if you haven't already noticed, we're going to start the pattern again. So 10 divided by 7 is 1. And there's a remainder of 3. We put a 0 next to the remainder. 30 divided by 7 is 4, with a remainder of 2. We put a 0 next to the remainder. 20 divided by 7 is 2, with the remainder of 6. We put a 0 next to the 6, so this becomes the number 60. 60 divided by 7 is 8, with the remainder of 4. We put a 0 next to the number 4. Now we're asking 40 divided by 7 is 5. Oops. Because 7 times 5 is 35, so there's a remainder of 5. We put a 0 next to the remainder. 50 divided by 7 is 1 with the, 7. 50 divided by 7 is 7 with the remainder of 1. We'll put a 0. So now, as you can see, this is quite a lengthy decimal. But you'll notice that there's a pattern occurring here. So we got 142857, 142857. The question's asking us to round it to 6 decimal places. Now let's assume it wasn't even asking us to do that. We know that we can rewrite this decimal as follows. If you remember, if we have 3 or more different numbers that keep repeating, then what we do is we put a dot over the first number in the pattern, and then we put a dot over the last number in the pattern. So this is how we would round this decimal. So we've converted 1/7 into a decimal, and we've rounded it to 6 decimal places. So if you've got that, if you know how to do that question, the rest will be pretty basic. Okay, so your home learning task for what we've covered so far is all of question 6, all of question 7, all of question 9, all of question 10, and question 16 and 17. So again, all of these questions that I've highlighted. I will actually go over some of these questions in the next video just to help you complete the rest of the questions, but this is what you need to complete.